on the screen if we have any questions for him. We're missing, I think we're missing, we're just missing Tom? Got it?
Mike Colson.
And Mike Colson had some issues, yeah. He's gonna call in supposedly.
He's gonna try to, his wife had a breakdown. And he's ready to get his car to come here, so he's gonna go rescue her first. And he was traveling, that's what so he's hoping he can get back at some point.
Okay,
He's gonna act virtually.
okay, great.
Folks, there was some cold drinks in here, well, maybe they're cold right now. Put on ice, but please help yourself.
And some Mark brought cookies and.
Cookies are here to eat too, you don't have to wait for dessert.
Yeah.
It's your favorite meal coming later.
You start first, right?
Yep.
Yes, I do, just like you.
Oh, everyone in the room is recording, and just so you know, we've discovered it's highly sensitive to even whispers.
Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you again, everybody, for coming. This is the fourth and last meeting of the working group, and I'm expecting that we'll make some really good progress tonight. But I wanted to just start the meeting. I don't think we need to go around the room. Everybody familiar with each other now, right? But I wanted to just start the meeting. The agenda's on the wall over there, and we can give it out if people didn't bring it. Let me just give it to you for you. So I wanted to just, we decided that it might be good because the legislation talks about trapper education. Just to have Nicole Meyer, who's our hunter trapper education coordinator, who's been with the department almost 10 years. Just give a very short overview of what we do for trapper education now and what it might look like should we change the regulations. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole. Walt and Sean, if you have technical difficulties, just let us know if you can't see the screen.
Cannot
Hear
see
us? Can you hear us, both of you?
and
Audio.
you can't see anything.
Yeah.
We can't hear you very well, though.
Yeah, it's not working.
It's not working.
No,
That's good.
Well,
We got it now.
If you need to say something, just interrupt and we'll try to see if we can increase the volume or something. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you, Nicole, for putting this together. Appreciate it.
Does that computer work? Or should I just do?
I haven't tried it yet.
Well,
All good.
okay,
You
that's,
need somebody to advance the computer. for you?
no, I don't mind just running through it. Hi, I'm Nicole Meyer, she, her, I work for Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department, as Tim said, under education program coordinator. Really happy to be here. You can keep my seat warm, that's fine. Like I said, this is, or like Tim said rather, this is gonna be an overview of what we do in trapper education. It's really not exhaustive. That would really take more something like 8 or 9 hours, which I would be happy to do. But I will be departing at 5:45 because I do have a toddler at home that I would like to see today. So that'd be great. So I guess I just want to go through a quick outline of what I'm going to be covering. I want to talk about our standards, our national and international standards that we follow versus the Vermont standards, which are actually stricter than the national and international standards. I want to talk about who the instructors are that teach, how many they have, how are they trained, who are the students that take trapper education, how many take trapper education each year, in what formats, and what happens after trapper education. A real quick brief overview. And of course, we're all adults here, so if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand during, but there is Q&A time right after this, so if you feel like you can save your question until after, that would be also fantastic. So our standards. Who establishes the standards for trapper education? There are actually two international bodies that govern the standards for trapper education in Vermont and in the States. The first is the International Hunter Education Association, and I'll go through those standards in just a moment. And then the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, AFWA, which actually puts together many of our course materials nationally. I'm going to go through how standards are established. Oh, I'll go also through how our standards established, and I'll go through the core curricula as well. So the International Hunter Education Association standards are written by wildlife biologists and environmental educators, representatives from all 50 states as well as international locales, and they are created within the AFWA's Trapper course framework. We also do have some non-government organization and volunteer input and support in those, including from like Fur Takers of America and the VTA and other educational groups as well. Like I said, those standards are reviewed by the IHEA USA as a whole, voted on, and were recently ratified at a conference, I believe in 2020 or 2021, the newest standards. I can find that information, but I just don't remember off the top of my head. The IHEA USA core curriculum stresses safe, legal, and responsible trapping. And then just down here, you can see the standards themselves are pretty comprehensive, and they're available to anyone on the IHEA USA website. You can go ahead and download. It's like a 10-page document. IHEA-USA.org is the website. And the general curricula is listed here. It includes wildlife ecology and management principles, personal responsibility and behavior, safe trap handling, field practices, trapping regulations, wildlife identification, trapper best management practices. And then there's non-core curricula, which includes fostering participation, community support, and then the value of mentorship and just general community. You might all know already the AFWA standards. Have you all looked through that already in this group or no?
No.
No, okay. So the AFWA Trapper education standards are written by wildlife biologists and environmental educators, again, from across the country. And these standards are in line with the National Project Wild curriculum, which is a K-12 in-school curriculum that is standardized within those academic standards and allow educators to bring outdoor education principles into their everyday classrooms. The basic North American Trapper education course is available online or in print to anyone for free. They're currently in the process of a major reformatting update to the course, basically to make it a little bit more in line with current, like if you go online and look at it, the formatting is pretty old on it. The content is fantastic and relevant and great. Just the formatting is a little difficult. But they're in the process of updating that. And again, the course is available online for free for anyone to take. That core curricula is mostly based on this same kind of safe, knowledgeable, and responsible. The core curricula is trapping preparation, actual in the field trapping, different techniques, and then fur. And again, throughout the process, safety, legality, and responsibility are all stressed. Vermont standards. We also follow that same general safe, legal, and ethical or responsible. Those are the kind of guiding principles throughout the whole Vermont hunter education program for both trapper, bow hunter, and hunter education. That's our main deal. Students for trapper education in Vermont must complete homework ahead of time through AFWA. So they either do that AFWA online course, which in some states that course is all you need for full trapper education certification. In Vermont, that's just the basic homework that you need to require ahead of time. You need to come with that base knowledge and then attend a 6 to 8 hour course. Sometimes the courses are longer. Basic topics covered are listed here. There is lots of redundancy. because in our view, it is very different to learn material from a book or an online program than it is to actually go in person and learn those things with in hand, right? And learn from a person. So in order to be certified, students also need to display safety, responsibility, and maturity throughout the program and complete a final exam and pass it with a 76% or better, or 78%. Nate, do you remember? 78% or better. How do we ensure that standards are met within our classes? That's a great question. I'm glad I asked it. We evaluate our classes periodically. We do peer reviews. So sometimes we'll send an instructor to go evaluate a class. We give them a checklist and a rubric to make sure that all of the points are being hit. And then we will, they'll report back. Sometimes a staff member will go and evaluate courses. And we also do take student evaluations as well at the end of every class. And this is not just for trapper education. Again, this is also for bow hunter and our hunter education classes. We haven't been doing those evaluations recently due to COVID, and those kinds of protocols are coming back now to do more evaluations. So it's not something that happened during COVID, but it will be happening again soon. We still do the student surveys though. The people who teach the courses are our volunteer instructors. 2 of them are here today. Well, you're not a volunteer, never mind. Our volunteers teach the courses. Also, our game wardens sometimes do teach courses as well. Our instructors are a good mix of ages, experiences, and different locations throughout the state. And right now, we have around 17 active certified volunteer instructors throughout the state. And in 2022, calendar year 22, 11 trapper education classes were taught. 5 of those classes were through our Green Mountain conservation camps. At advanced weeks, students can choose to take either trapper education certification, do a backpacking course, or do a waterfowl course. And so a number of students choose to take trapper education and become certified there. That's generally where our game wardens teach the classes, although they do teach independent trapper education classes as well. And then there were 6 classes for the general public, one of which Kevin taught here in this room last weekend. More on instructors. How are they certified? It is a pretty lengthy process. Not just anyone can be in front of a classroom and in front of kids teaching them our curriculum. Right, Kevin? Yeah. It's a pretty lengthy. They have to send in an application to our office, submit to a background check, undergo fingerprinting, do an interview with law enforcement, and then attend a full day in-person training with our staff, and then do an in-person apprentice teaching, which is just like how teachers do student teaching so that they can see how a real live class is taught. That process takes usually about a year to complete for some people because they are volunteers. Sometimes the dates don't work with their schedule. Sometimes it can take longer to complete this process. And in order for our instructors to stay active and be able to keep on volunteering to teach this course, they need to take 1 professional development course through us that's approved by us every other year and teach a course every other year. This is so that they stay current and that they know what's new with the department, with the program, any new regulations. We send out pretty regular communications to our instructors, maybe to the point where they get tired of hearing from us a little bit sometimes, to tell them about anything new in the program as well. Anyone can take a trapper education course. All of our courses in our hunter education program are open to anyone of any experience level, any age, any residency. And it's all free, and all of our program materials are free. All of the courses are free. It costs nothing to take one of these classes. To become certified, like I said earlier, students must display safety, responsibility, maturity, and again, pass that final exam. A quick breakdown of Trapper education students by the numbers for the last fiscal year, which was July 1, 21 to June 30 of 22. We had a total of 123 students graduate Trapper education during that time. And I'm sorry, I thought this would show up a little bit better, but you can see this orange slice, the largest amount of graduates that we had were between the ages of 11 and 15. So that's mostly kids that are going through our camp program, or students that are taking it with family members. And then the next largest chunk of students by age is this gray. 20% of students are between the ages of 16 and 20 years old. And then again, in fiscal year, students by gender identity, 77% of students who passed Trapper education were male, 23% were female, and we do have an other option for gender identity. We had 0%. And then we had 59 students pass Trapper education at our Green Mountain Conservation Camps, that's GMCC, and then 64 students pass not in our camps, out in the wild in another program. And then quickly after the class, after they become certified, they are eligible to trap in Vermont. But we stress that this is not the end of their education, right? They still need to stay apprised of any updates to laws and regulations, stay active in the trapping community, and we highly also suggest that if they don't have an experienced trapping mentor in their life, that they find someone, contact the instructor, contact us to find someone who might be willing to take them trapping and really show them the ropes. And that's it.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
We have time for questions for Nicole. Anybody have some questions around this?
I'm Joanne from the Humane Society of the U.S. A question about nuisance wildlife control operators. Do you provide any best practices on humane exclusion devices or other things besides using like little traps?
So for cold traps, what do you, exclusion devices?
Like something that a door, like a one-way door, if somebody's got a raccoon in their house, so some way to get the animal out without actually having to trap it.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't do a ton on nuisance. Any nuisance wildlife control operator in Vermont needs to take the Vermont Trapper education course and able to keep their nuisance wildlife control operator license status. We don't get a ton of those. Well, that's not true. We do get quite a bit actually. You have more information on that than I do about that. But yeah, we do talk about that in the class. But again, the main focus of our class is safety, responsibility, and legality. And then you mentioned something about discount methods. Did you? Oh, thank you.
I'll say, Joanne, we've been working on a manual that would address those things that you're talking about. It's taken us way longer than we expected. And of course, now I'm retired, but I'm sure that the new person, that's one of the things that's on the list to finish before long. So hopefully that will be available in the next year.
Yeah, because I know we have at least one business here in Vermont, Park Wildlife
Yeah.
Removal, and
Yeah,
she does that kind of business.
that's right. And
I
we
would just like
you
to
know,
see that,
Yeah.
that stressed as much,
Sure.
if not more than.
yeah,
I mean, you talk about the use of have-a-heart traps and other things and other devices like that in the class, and use of a catch pole for release and things like that as well. Those are discussed in the class, but again, they're not stressed because, I mean, they're talked about, and there's actually a full chapter if you go to look at the online word, you'll see that there's whole parts of chapters on that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
So if somebody got their trapping license like 20 years ago, is there any kind of, like, you have to go back every 5 years and get it renewed? I mean, how does a trapper who took a course again, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, how do they stay in the know?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do stay in the know as far as laws and regulations, or stay in the know as far as.
Well, I guess so there is no resort, like you don't have to go back every couple of years and renew your trapper's license.
Just
you
like-
do for-
Just like for the driver's license, we don't have any kind of testing or recertification for hunter education or trapper education or bow hunter education. If we do encourage that folks stay in the loop and in the know, and we do send out our trapper further newsletters to all the licensed trappers. And we highly encourage anyone who hasn't been to a trapper education course in a long time to go ahead and take one. I mean, Kevin, you get people in your classes who are older and who have had trapper education before and are brushing up their skills.
Yeah, a nice guy from Pulte this time was 65 years old. He says, I'm retired now and I took it years ago, but I want to see what's going on. And that's really common.
Yeah,
It's just not required. That's
not required. no.
There's also
It
advanced
just-
traffic we get every.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the, I was gonna ask that
Yeah.
question. How many of those are many of those?
Every other year.
every other
And is
year.
it repeats or is it new?
So in order to go take it, you have to have previously
Oh,
passed.
okay.
Yeah, so
You have
it's
to
only
have
for people
passed.
who've already passed travel.
I mean, we do email and snail mail to anyone who has passed trapper education in the last 5 to 10 years to offer them that chance at trappers, advanced trappers.
And also, so let's say I was a trapper from Virginia and I wanted to come trap in Vermont. All I would have to do is show you my Virginia trapper's license and I could get a Vermont trapper's license. I wouldn't have to go through the trapper ed. Correct?
Trapper education is slightly different. It is at the discretion of the commissioner which states that we will accept trapper education from. But most all 50 states abide by these same standards. And in general, yes, we will. I would need to consult my list. But there are some states where we would need them to take trapper education.
That would mean that they wouldn't know, Vermont specific, needs and.
But just like if you're driving in another state and you come to Vermont, let's say, or you go to a state where there's no right on red allowed, right? You don't know that, you have to pick up the laws of that specific state, right? Just like here, you need to pick up our hunting and fishing law digest to know the laws of the spot where you're going to. It's the same kind of concept.
Real quick right here.
Yeah.
Just following up on that, I was on an expedition in Alaska and I get a fishing license. And much to my surprise, and probably everybody in this room, I've now been a licensed trapper in Alaska. Because it came with the fishing license
Wow.
and hunting, by the way, they just did it all together. So is it required, say, to trap in Vermont, if I were coming from Alaska? And I show up, yeah, I had a trapping license, but I would still have to take the course because I hadn't taken one.
If you haven't taken a trapper education course, in some states, you can show us a previous proof of a license in order to purchase that.
That would be up to the commissioner, whether he accept Alaska's. Okay, I would suggest he doesn't, by the way, but as of 2012,
Interesting.
yeah, I was shocked myself, like what?
How many licensed trappers are there?
That's a better question for you.
This is off the top of my head, so don't quote me as exact, but we probably send out about 1,300 trapper mail surveys. People who buy trapping licenses, those are not all active trappers. I would say there's probably around 500 right now. But that's varies. We've had as many as 3,000 in the past. So, yeah.
Last question. So like Vermont specific regulations and best practices, wanton waste, was passed in May and that applies to fur bearers and animals that are trapped. Has that been included in your trapping curriculum that's being taught right now? Because I haven't seen it on social media or your website or anything like that.
Yeah, great question. So new laws, when they come about, we actually do equip all of our hunter education instructors with a guide to any new laws that have come out. So this is something that we do right away after we're notified that there's a new law. So all of our hunter ed and trapper education instructors, when they have registered a new course through us, along with all of their class supplies, we mailed them a guide to the new laws that just came out so that they were all prepared with that information. So yeah, And I will say that it's difficult, we cover, there's a whole section in our curriculum about laws and ethics, and those new laws all would fall under that section as well. Yeah, great question.
Well, Brenda, if I can add to your question, I'm just doing the final review of the 2023 Vermont Hunting and Trapping Guide. And so that will be in there for people who buy a hunting or trapping license starting January 1. And we have found through social research that that publication is the Bible for sporting people in the state of Vermont. That's the most heavily used, sought after source for anyone who hunts, fishes, or traps in the state of Vermont. You'll get that guide, and my guess is, maybe Mike, you could comment on that, but that's usually probably used by our law enforcement also a lot.
Yeah,
on the
we certainly-
statutes. So,
We use it as a quick reference, but then we
Yeah.
also have our copies.
Yeah.
I just think for, oh, sorry, Josh, go ahead.
We also did share those updated laws on our website, through our news that goes out to all hunting and trapping license holders. So those have been widely publicized to the audience that it's doing.
And usually they're included we try to include them in the newsletter as well, annually, if there's any changes.
I just think social media is a very effective way, a free way to reach a broad range of people. And I think that's a missed opportunity not to be posted there on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And
Yeah, it may be less so with the trapping community,
Yeah.
just not that, I'm sure that most of the people in this room are on social media, but many are not. So we still do a paper newsletter just to make sure we get to everybody. And that goes out to everybody on our mailing list.
Last meeting, or maybe it was a previous meeting, one of the topics that came up was dispatch of trafficking. Can you just say a little bit about how that's approached?
Yeah, we talk about main dispatch methods and how they could be different depending on the situation and how to safely, ethically, and in the quickest, most humane way, dispatch an animal. And usually that's with, usually that's just with a 22. But that, again, that might be different depending on the situation that we're in. So it is something, and we also really stress in that personal safety, responsibility to the animal, responsibility to the landscape, responsibility to yourself and other non-hunters who might be in the area as well. Yeah.
Any other questions for Nicole?
Nicole, do you know how many non-resident trapping licenses you sell?
I don't.
3 or
Chris, do
4.
you know?
Yeah, that's what I would say, 3 or 4.
My sense is it's not many people.
Right,
It's,
yeah.
we principally deal with a resident trapping
Yeah.
population.
Unlike hunting, the trapping community is mostly Vermonters.
People are trapping within their communities where
Right.
they live.
Right. Anything else?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Appreciate you putting that together for
Oh,
us.
yeah, you got it.
Time to spare.
I know, wow.
Hopefully you get home before your son's in bed.
Well, now I will.
Don't be offended, you're a lot about Nicole, and you just want to be away.
Yeah,
from
that's
her.
right.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Is there, so is all this information on your website or is there a manual or
So
something?
the proper
Yeah.
education manual is available on the Aqua website. We do have printed copies that I'd be happy to, actually, I have,
Well, Joanne, if you leave us your address, if you want a hard copy.
Okay.
we
yeah,
can-
and the Aqua manual is available on the Aqua's website, and that's the manual that we use. is
Okay.
The Aqua manual. And the manual is the same exact content as the Aqua online course. So if you signed up for the Aqua online course to take that, that's also free, and it's the same exact information, just presented in a different format. Like I said, the IHEA USA standards are also available right on the IHEA USA's website for free for anyone. What other resources are you looking for?
just that.
Oh, okay, yep, yeah.
So Alpha's manual, though, to Senator Bray's question, does it go into detail about main methods of killing? Because I'm curious to see what the trapper ed instructors, I want to see their manual that they use, their curriculum, you know, how the topic of methods of killing trapped animals is discussed. I haven't seen that ever.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a like word for word, this is how you talk about it, because I feel that that's a very, that's a subject that I really feel, you know, you present it to your students, and then they often have a lot of questions. And it's best, in my opinion, to work off of those students, start really big and then work off of those student questions, so that it's the most relevant information presented to those students. Although there certainly is, when you go to that AQUA, manual or AQUA online course, and when you look at the IHEA USA standards, there are prescribed topics that should be covered, and you can view those dispatch methods there.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate
guys.
it. So while do you have to pack up or do you just have to get?
No, I
your
just have my,
thumb drive?
it's not in there, but my thumb drive that I just took out, but it's not in my, no, it's not.
Is that it right there? On
It's
the side,
blue.
or that's the?
Nope. Okay, well, it's lost. How did I lose it?
Did anybody see her take?
Oh, wait, okay, wait. It was very deeply in my pocket. Oh, my God.
Been a long day.
This last night, my wife always says, look in your pockets.
I did, I looked at my pocket.
I'm always looking for my glasses on the top of my head, so. I neglected to, you all set, thank you again. So I didn't give us time to talk about the minutes. I know that we got them out fairly late and they're very long and detailed. And you may not have had a chance to go. We got one comment so far, but I'm sure everybody hasn't had a chance to read through them. If you have comments that you want to raise tonight, that's great. But if you want to take a little time to read through them and send any comments that you might have on the minutes to Josh before Friday, is that enough time?
End of day Friday would be great for me.
What time?
End of day.
End of day Friday?
Yeah, can I just ask a clarifying question? Well, regarding the body gripping trap, if you just take.
Oh,
step
sorry.
over. So the POW, recommendation was to have all body gripping traps submerged fully underwater, correct?
Yeah, and we'll get to this.
I don't know, but I'm just using this as a statement. I didn't be able to go through the minutes
Okay,
that well. I briefly ran through it, but I just wanted to see if you could check to see if that is just the fact that it was supposed to be fully submerged, because I feel like there were some emails going around with some inaccurate information as to what was proposed and then what the VTA did oppose. So I just want to make sure that we are very clear that the recommendation was to have body gripping trap
Well,
fully submerged.
yeah, so I was gonna ask Joanne, Brenna, and Rob if this here, because I took your recommendations and I consolidated them so they fit on a flip chart. And I wanted to make sure that these actually jive with what you proposed and that I didn't
I'll
leave
have to be a
something
little
important out.
closer.
I know, and it's supposed to be a red marker and it turned out to be a light pink marker. So it's harder to read than I thought it would
I think
be,
it says.
but I can read it to you.
Yeah, that would be.
Okay, so the first one is the VTA petition, no objections, but do not believe they will improve animal welfare. The second one is trail setbacks, should include federal lands and WMAs. I should have added also, you had a 500-foot, I'll add that, a 500-foot or more setback for public trails, class 4 roads, playgrounds, parks, and other public locations, which I will add to this. Use of baits and lures, prohibit the baiting of trap with meat or other animal-derived products if bait is visible from the air on both public and private lands. And baits buried and set away from the trap by 50 feet. And then the fourth one, body gripping traps. Body gripping traps shall be fully submerged in water. No body gripping traps on land or partially submerged. Prohibit the drowning of animals in submersion sets. Does that accurately capture what you proposed last week?
In trapper ed, I mean, as far as the body gripping kill trap set in the water, is it preferred that they be fully submerged, like if you're trapping for beaver or for otter? I mean, I thought that best practices was that once the body gripping kill trap is set underwater, you know, for a beaver, otter, muskrat, that the animal should be hopefully killed immediately, but if not, should not be able to resurface. I thought that was best practices for water trapping. So
Somebody want to answer that, Kevin or Tom or?
Got a kill device, and the kill device, it's gonna be like a body gripping trap. The part about not resurfacing, if the animal's caught in a foothold trap and it's free swimming, or if it's in a cable restraint and it's free swimming, or if it goes in a cage, it should not ever be able to resurface. But the element of is a body gripping trap, which is designed differently than the free swimming ones. It could be partially submerged or fully submerged. That's not a point there about complete.
a couple of years ago, there was some rulemaking to extend the trap check times from 24 hours to 72 hours on underwater sets. And we didn't oppose it because we thought that the traps were completely submerged underwater and it wouldn't make a difference. The animal, if it wasn't killed immediately, it would drown within 20 minutes tops. So now that we know that, you know, these body gripping kill traps, they're not required to be fully submerged, and the animal could end up caught by the tail, caught by the torso, not dying immediately, not drowning, you know, and just being
So we'll
subject
have,
to,
yeah, we'll have time to talk. This was really just the minutes. We were just talking about the minutes.
yeah,
And so we'll have, there's time on the agenda to have more in-depth discussion on each one of these items. But I think you were asking if this was accurate.
Yeah, I'm just wanting clarification because there was an email, like I said, that went around that it was inaccurate, so I just want to make sure that we were on point with what.
And so this is accurate. This reflects, if I add the setbacks, this reflects your proposal from the last time, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I have to read, but yeah, I think that's.
Okay, because I mean, I basically just highlighted and then put it up here so that people could see it. And I actually, we can give it out, we'll give it out in a little while. We made copies so that everybody could have the both the BTA petition and or recommendations and the recommendations from POW and HSUS and WC.
Kim, Bruce, Brenna, Joanne, I think it would be worth, just for accuracy of the minutes now, just going through this point on the board, making sure Bruce's questions addressed, that Joanne and Brenna's position is accurately stated. Can we just do that real quick?
Yeah, so the question on the table is, does this reflect? And I can read it again,
I think that would be valuable.
or
Yeah,
I
it's not-
can,
mean, the only thing is it's not complete, like the 500 feet or more.
well, I know that, I left this off by accident.
Which she has said she'll update this to reflect, but we just want to make sure that the body gripping kill traps that Bruce was asking about, that we have the correct understanding of HSUS and POW's position, so Bruce can get that answered. Does that seem doable? So does the board reflect that?
Yes, I think it does.
Okay, are you clear on what you want to understand, Bruce?
I'm good.
Great,
Thank you.
Okay, so, beyond that, are there any other immediate concerns or changes to the minutes? And again, is Friday enough time for people to read through them and provide Josh with any kind of edits or changes, to those?
Well,
Rob,
I'm gonna take advantage of waiting till Friday.
okay,
A hard time reading all that, and I haven't looked at it, so.
yeah,
Josh, can you make sure my email gets added, because I haven't seen it?
yeah, I'm sorry about that, Mike, you should have, you should have added you a while ago. So apologize for that. Okay, so I think we are good with the minutes. We'll expect if it is any edits or changes, feel free to let Josh know by Friday. Before we break for dinner, I think it would be helpful, I think, Bruce, are you going to give the presentation around
Yeah, it's not much of a
the
presentation.
recommendations? Okay. We have copies of your recommendations if you want us to give them out. Or you,
That's
okay,
fine.
all right. And I'll also give out the HSUS, POW, BWC ones again as well.
Sean or Walt, while they're doing that, could you just unmute yourself and talk and see if we can hear you better? I fiddled around with a computer.
I'm here.
That's much better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Because it says up here, BWC.
That was the result of the phone conference, the phone call we had before last meeting. Those were the notes. You were there.
At dinner time, you guys can go up and just make sure that this is a reflection of what you have right here, when you can see it better. Did you get a copy? Yeah. No, this should be us before the meeting. You got the other one. You have three. This is the new one that came in.
No, that's what I.
Started flying. They were eager to fly. Makes mistakes. That's me and so excited. So I want to do it's really nice.
Okay. So Bruce, are you in a position to present your recommendations?
If I present.
And while you're presenting, I'm gonna just put them up here so that they're both visible. So when you're done, make sure I capture what you said accurately, okay?
Yeah, it's 5%, you just mean read this.
Or, yeah, however you wanna.
Yeah, so in discussions with setbacks, we're going back to the working group meeting, which we had thought came to some, thought we're making progress on. We recommend that no trap should be set within 10 feet of the travel portion of a trail on a state land excluding WMAs. That'd be excluding traps set in waterways and under bridges and culverts. And really at this time, there's really no scientific data showing that any information, any risk to the public health near playgrounds, parks, et cetera, due to over 1 million trap nights from BMP study and Vermont Fish and Wildlife data from over 30,000 annual trap nights do not show any risk to this. Also, we're not trapping in a high use time period when these public areas are being used. So for use of bait, so the VTA recommends that meat-based bait used in conjunction with trapping shall be covered at the time the trap is set. Covering shall include but are not limited to brush, branches, leaves, soil, snow, water, or enclosures constructed of wood, metal, wire, plastic, or natural materials. Use of body gripping traps, no meat-based baited body gripping traps shall be set on the ground. Cable restraints, so cable restraints are an approved BMP device. So the VTA recommends that they be allowed for use in the state of Vermont. And cable restraints are cable devices that are designed to capture fur bearers in a manner that holds them unharmed and alive until the trapper returns to the set. So the animals are alive in the cable restraints, so they may be released unharmed into the wild or harvested. And we would recommend that trappers shall obtain some certification through the Fish and Wildlife Department prior to being allowed to set cable restraints. I would say that would be regardless of whether we have an existing or current trapping license. And just additional topics for discussion is that the VTA recommends more game wardens would be helpful for enforcement purposes. And as always, trapper education shall include the new regulation as passed by the Fish and Wildlife Department.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. So I think I'll suggest, and if you have any suggestions, either of you guys, let me know, but I think I will suggest our dinner is here. It might be a good idea to take a break, have our dinner, think about if there's any alignment between these two recommendations. Chat with people if you have questions about what their recommendation means, or if you want to know more about where they were coming from. I would suggest you have a conversation with somebody who's proposed something and you have questions about it. And let's come back and we have time to discuss all of these. But let's come back and see if there's any thoughts about whether there's some common areas where there's some alignment between the two proposals. It'd be nice to identify those right off the bat. So there is salad and pizza out in the room around the corner. Mark brought drinks. Help yourself and come back in about 15 or 20 minutes and we'll see if we can find some places where we overlap a little bit. So,
And there's
All right.
two gluten-free pizzas, the smaller ones up in this room.
great. Thank you, Chris. All right. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Oh, that's not place.
Then they're able to do it.
Yes. Yeah, are you off recording your own one?
Yeah.
But I think I can see some potential areas of alignment when I look at these proposals. So I want to start with the exposed bait proposal from each group and see if anybody else can identify some areas where there's agreement.
Can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Under the BTA recommendation, how would water be a covering? I don't understand how that would be considered a covering. For bait.
Do one of you want to?
Sure, some folks use fish for bait, and that could be a way that's covered.
But that doesn't help me, I'm sorry. I need more.
Someone's using fish bait,
Fish bait, oh, okay.
it could be underwater.
So it'd be underwater.
Yeah.
Okay. Underwater, not full water or something. So it'd still be visible.
If it's underwater, then it wouldn't, the issue of a raptor getting caught in a fish bait set underwater would kind of be a moot point, I think.
Yeah, the point was that it would not be visible.
Yeah. So water,
I did a trap in the wintertime and up in a bucket set I use underwater is in 8 feet of water. The fish inside the bucket with the trap set on the outside of it. And it's an effective trapping strategy. I don't think you could possibly catch anything but.
The target
very active.
species.
I mean, we're definitely gonna need time to go back to our boards and talk about this more. We're not prepared to, but I mean, I do, Maine considers feathers, bone, and fur all methods that are all means of bait. So this just says meat-based, but that wouldn't.
I think you're talking about.
So Brenna, you're concerned about raptors and the potential to capture raptors and other species. And would those other items tend to be attracted to raptors?
I'm just going based on, a neighboring state of Maine, as far as what they require for, are we on the use of bait right now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, Maine's, isn't limited to just meat-based. It's also any animal matter. So feathers, bones, fur.
Just a point of biology, most raptors are sight hunters, not scent hunters, unlike vultures. So whether it's meat-based or feather, as far as you're talking about an accipiter, which is a bird predator, that would be, or any, those would tend to be attractive, I would think, to them. I have no experience with it. I'm just speaking off of what I know. Or think I know.
So I guess we're looking for areas of alignment here. So if we can see if there's anything where we agree rather than disagree, that would be really helpful.
Let me just add that, that's a two-way ask. So, BTA, Federation of Sportsmen, be thinking about the document that you've received from HSUS et al. And now you have your proposal document here. What areas of alignment might occur to you?
And I'm not asking for any, for you to modify your proposal. I'm just asking, are there places there where you see from both proposals some similarities?
Yes. Bait should be covered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So there's an agreement that bait should be covered.
Meat-based, yeah.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to cover, you know, poplars, of which were used for catching beavers. That'd be just kind of silly, right?
Mhm. Does everybody feel comfortable with that? Does that make sense to everybody in the room? We're not saying this is the entire, we're just looking for places where there is some agreement, some alignment between the two proposals. So the one that Kevin threw out was that meat-based bait should be covered. Anybody disagree with that? Yes,
No,
Senator.
Not a disagreement, just looking for clarification. So will this list be treated as just areas of agreement or alignment, or as the recommendation? But sometimes when a list comes out that's things that were agreed on or aligned, and people think that that's it, as opposed to the things where something couldn't reach agreement, but it's still alive.
Right. No, this would only, this is just where there's some alignment. It's not the base, it's not the full recommendation. It's not like we're gonna pare the recommendations down only to the aligned topics, but we're looking, the department and the commissioner will want to know, was there any agreement between the two groups? And can we build off of that? Yes. Anything else? And we don't, I mean, we're still on covered bait. Anything else on covered bait that people can agree with? I mean, if that's the only thing, that's okay. We can move on to the
But I
next.
just want to, again, I get confused as to what this means. I mean, so areas of alignment, yes, we agree meat should be covered, but we also believe that all animal matter should be covered. So
I think that's clear in your proposal, right? In your proposal, you laid that out, didn't you? All animal-derived products, if bait is visible from the air on both public and private lands. So we have your proposal and we know that that's what you're asking for. And we're just saying between the two proposals, are there any areas where it seems like there's some overlap? We're trying to find some areas where there is some agreement around what's been proposed. We're not suggesting that that's where it's going to end up. We're just looking for areas of agreement.
I think in this bullet, that is the only,
Okay,
I mean, that's the
Okay.
lowest common denominator.
Okay.
You want all, products covered,
okay,
that includes beef based.
okay.
I would say we're in agreement.
All right. And
Just,
Josh,
I'm not speaking for everybody.
yeah, Josh, what I want to make sure of is that we capture the outliers as well, the places where there's disagreement.
Yep.
And we'll have that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I would also just ask, while we're on this point, so we have a lowest common denominator, to use Joanne's words, around meat-based bait should be covered. And knowing that people here can't commit to anything more without discussing with their boards, are there points of discussion we could have about, about other elements of the covered bait proposals? Trapping contingent, do you have questions about things you see in HSUS contingent? HSUS contingent, do you have questions about how trapping contingent came to their recommendation?
Well, I have one quick, may not be of much consequence, but I was similarly puzzled by water. And Kevin did a good job of explaining that. And I would point out that the HSUS and POW recommendation of not being visible from the air would be consistent with Kevin's set 8 feet down. So, please.
And actually, Rob, that may actually get at another, because I believe, let me just see. Use of bait, the VTA recommends that meat-based bait used in conjunction with trapping shall be covered at the time the trap is set. Covering shall include So you don't actually say not visible from the air. Is there,
That was in our,
that's in yours, but,
No.
and I'm just wondering if
What I'm
there's
saying-
a reason why you guys opted not to say not visible from the air.
The trappers,
Yeah,
well, if we have a 5 foot elevated trap, and so it's 5 feet off the ground already, and we cover it, which is, it could be covered with a mesh or with wire mesh or something like that, nothing's gonna drag it away.
yeah,
The pathway from the trap to the bait is not a pathway that raptors are gonna take. It's a pathway for raccoons, for opossums, for fishers, that they will take the pathway because they can't fly.
yeah,
But the raptors might land on the covered bait up above, but it's already off the ground.
yeah.
So, the fishers have one pathway to go. It's a very predictable set that way.
Mhm.
No one's in danger that way.
Gotcha. Well, and so I thought where you're going, would be if you had a cage over it, a wire cage over it, it would be still visible from above, but would still exclude raptors.
Off the ground, it's really hard to make something 100% invisible. You know what I mean? You still get the attraction, which is what you're after, because these are meat-eating animals, kind of like a lot of us, but, that's what you're after, is they need to be able to smell it. If it was 5 feet off the ground, how would you make it 100% invisible? But you can make it accessible to these, terrestrial animals, because they'll climb that pole. And at the same time, keep it in a place where birds aren't going to be able to remove all the bait, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Instead of gonna land on it, blue jays are gonna peck on it, that's all fine, they're not gonna get caught.
I guess, I appreciate Josh's recommendation. I mean, asking the trappers in the room, we know other states like Maine already have regulations in place to reduce incidental take of animals like raptors. So have you reached out to your colleagues in other states? I mean, Vermont is behind the times in this particular regulation. Other states already have this in place, and I do think that Fish and Wildlife Services is going to ask state Fish and Wildlife departments to do this due to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the protections being restored for those species as incidental takes. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I do think that there's other states that are doing it that we could lean on. And it's not California, it's Maine, which is also, very, hunting, trapping friendly state. I mean, have you talked to anybody in Maine?
I've trapped with them in Maine, I've been on the trap line in Maine, and
So what
for
do you think
example,
about their regulation?
pine marten was what we're after, and so we followed all the regulations, didn't break any rules or anything. But what I'm describing, where you had a cage covering over an elevated trap, is exactly what we used, mile after mile after mile through the Maine woods as we're driving along legally trapping. And that bait was visible, there's no question about it, but it was also elevated, it was also covered, so it couldn't be easily removed by raptors. They're not gonna spend time there anyway. Chickadees, blue jays, yeah, they'll stop in for a quick meal, whatever. But it's in Maine, you can do that legally. So
Well, I'm reading their regulation. It says animal matter, example, feathers, bone, and fur meet the definition of bait, invisible attractor, and must be covered or not visible from above if less than 50 yards from a foothold or killer type trap. So, I mean, it goes on to say other things as well. So I guess what I'm saying is there's already regulations in place in states like Maine and probably a lot of other states. Vermont doesn't have anything. So
Vermont does, so we have to keep our traps elevated, that kind of thing is really important, especially if you're trying to change the dynamic of what you're catching in the December traps. But, it sounds like we're behind the times, we're not.
well, I'm talking about like a lead hole trap set with deer legs around it. That's gonna attract a raven, it's gonna attract a red-tailed hawk. Vermont does not have any regulations currently that requires that bait to either be set away from the trap or cover. So we are behind the times in that regard, and that was the impetus for this recommendation. So
We're still recommending the same thing though, Brennan. I mean, covering.
But it's a ground.
but it's actually
That's
just
what they're
limited to meat. So meat-based base.
I mean, this is all bait that we're talking about here. This is all bait, even if it's on the ground and we're using foothold trap. It's all bait that we're talking about being covered. So it's not just in the air, it's on the ground, it's everywhere.
Right, but the BTA recommends that meat-based bait, which means that you could still use fur, other visual attractants, feathers, bone.
And that's why we agree that meat-based is where we're going with this.
Right,
So,
but that,
okay, so it sounds like, I think we should just move on. It sounds like this is a disagreement that the department will consider all of the comments that have come in from everybody, and the commissioner will make recommendations on this based on what we can find out from other states, what the science says, and we'll see what comes out of that.
And Kim, I like how you just transitioned it. I think we're gonna need to do that tonight.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. I think we're at the point where if we can't find alignment, it'll be the department's responsibility to make recommendations. There'll be more opportunities to weigh in on those through public meetings, either the general public meeting or board meetings. And, but I think, I think we've had as much discussion as we can. And if we can't find any agreement tonight, we'll just move forward and leave it up to the commissioner to make his recommendations to the legislature. Okay, let's move on to killing traps on land. So the POW HSUS recommendation was body gripping traps shall be fully submerged in water. No body gripping traps on land or partially submerged. Prohibit the drowning of animals in submerged sets. The VTAs is body gripping traps, no meat-based baited body gripping traps shall be set on the ground. Any areas of alignment with that?
yeah, that still doesn't get to the issue of, like, for example, last year, a black bear had its head caught in a body gripping kill trap set for fisher in December, and it died. So, our recommendation was no body gripping kill traps on land.
What's the data say about that, Kim, about catching bears?
I mean,
In body gripping traps, is that, I've heard of this case, but it seems sort of like an outlier.
well, I mean, I will ask Mark and Dave if they've heard of any more than I have. I'm only aware of one, but I'm not, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's been more than that. I don't know if.
Sean, you've been at it a lot of years. Have you ever heard of more than 5 bears being caught in the last 15 years
Well, in body gripping, you're asking.
in body gripping traps? Oh, sorry.
Or Tom
Want me to text him?
or Mike, either, yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a real anomaly. They just don't show up as a species that gets caught in body gripping traps. So that's actually one of the first ones I've ever heard of, and I'm part of the National Bear Managers Group. I'm aware in the last 3 years of 3 bears getting their heads caught in milk jugs and biologists needing to immobilize them and remove the milk jugs. And I think one was in.
Vermont.
Fouorth Hammond needed to.
I removed a milk can, the metal milk can.
Yes. But my only point is, that's a real anomaly too.
Right.
And there are things, but I'm just not, from the trap data we have and all the target and non-target information, bears, and bear populations are as robust or more robust than they've been in 50 years, continent-wide. It's just a very infrequent and unfortunate event, but a very, very anomaly event.
I also wonder too, with, bears, with, climate change and warmer Decembers, bears may be out on the landscape more in December, where fisher and bobcat trapping season using body gripping kill traps happen. So, I think we may be seeing trends, if it happens once, or I think we need to look at the animals that are currently being trapped in body gripping kill traps, and those are namely fisher, bobcat, and mink, maybe. Those animals can still be trapped, but using other traps. So I mentioned this before, the benefits, of using body gripping kill traps for fisher and bobcat, really don't, in my mind, justify all of the potential, suffering, like, animals that are getting their heads caught in these traps. Or there was Joanne shared an email with a bear who had a conibear trap on its limb walking around. It wasn't in Vermont, but these things happen and they don't need to happen. We're not asking trappers to not trap those animals anymore with these recommendations, but we are asking that these very dangerous, powerful kill traps, be restricted to underwater only. And because there's no limitation on the number of traps that may be set, you could have one trapper setting, numerous traps in one area.
So I guess I think I appreciate where you're coming from, Brenna. I think we understand that that's a distinction between your proposal and the BTA proposal. And maybe that's where we have to end the discussion, unless there's places where there's some commonality or some alignment between the two, which I think I see some, but
So no meat-based, so that still means you can use a body gripping kill trap on the ground using like a castor lure or skunk urine, is that true? So you're still allowing these body gripping kill traps to be set on the ground, but using scent lures.
That's true, and what we're trying to avoid is the inexperienced trapper who kind of goes out and makes what we call a cubby set, which is a box, and then just puts the trap down and throws some meat in the back, in a place where it's inappropriate. We're not saying that we want to get rid of our traps in any way. They're a highly effective, highly balanced tool that makes us feel like we can do a complete job when we are on the landscape with permission to trap. The idea that something has to be fully submerged is a non-starter for us, Kim, so we're not gonna entertain that at all. So,
okay. So it sounds like there's quite a bit of disparity between these
Sure.
two, or there's not a lot of commonality. So again, I would say we'll move off of this subject, and the department and the commissioner will make some recommendations based on all the information that you've all provided to us. So, okay, let's move off of, I'll just put none here. And the third one down is setbacks on private land, public land, sorry.
And Kim, I mean, if we could go back even to like August 23rd, I mean, when we left that meeting, we were at 75 feet from a trail on state lands, not WMAs. So I mean, even coming backwards from that, the next meeting, we're now looking at 500 feet as being a request. But at one time, this group talked about 75 feet away. So, I mean, that's where had been basing our discussions on previously.
Is there any wiggle room in the group for that discussion, starting from that point, I guess, is what you're suggesting? You think we were there at one point?
I think we were there at one point, and then it get changed drastically. And that's why I said we're starting last week, we said 0, but I mean, obviously I said that we'd also move from that as well. But moving in conjunction with that 75-foot starter that we had discussed. So meet somewhere from there, not turn it around completely.
Is there any interest in the group to have a conversation around the distance? Yes.
Maybe before we move into this next point.
Yeah.
Because we moved pretty quick through these and we are touching on some points of real difference. 5-minute break, we can, this is the tense stuff. Rather than move through it too quickly, I'd love to see us acknowledge that this is tense, but really focus on trying to find points of commonality rather than bouncing off when we find points of divisiveness. I'm suggesting this, the group doesn't have to go by it. I wanted to take everyone's temperature, short break, and turn.
I might suggest we continue to, with all due respect,
Okay.
and we continue to plug away, and then with time left over, we circle back and look at each of these points again to see if things have changed.
Sure.
Just a suggestion.
Does that feel good to everybody?
Yeah, I don't feel like any.
You say that.
I don't feel like any of
I'm okay with
Okay.
continuing.
Okay. All right. So I guess in terms of trail setbacks, there is a huge disparity between the numbers right now. And I guess I'm wondering if there's a willingness to have a conversation around bringing those a little closer together, providing the commissioner with some suggestions that might be closer than 10 feet versus 500 feet.
Well, I'd like to maybe look more at, the legislative mandate that, isn't just, they had its state land excluding WMAs. So we're kind of back to, I thought we had to follow, I'm looking at something that Fish and Wildlife handed out, legislative mandate. It says here what the mandate is, and it requires, basically any other public location where persons may reasonably be expected to recreate. So I almost think that this, we're so far away on two different islands as far as what, these three groups want to see and what the trappers are offering to put forth. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to have because we're still stuck on where these trap setbacks are going to happen. Requirement is much more vast than state land, and that's what our membership and our coalition members, thought that we were operating off of Act 159. And now we're just talking about state land excluding WMAs and a whole host of other places. So, I think I need to go back to my board and have a discussion before I can really even.
Well, maybe Catherine, is now a time
Yes.
possibly when you could talk, did you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna suggest that this
okay.
Catherine.
Catherine, is now
Explain.
the time, are you, why are you shaking your head? Are you comfortable talking a little bit about what we tried to do in terms of trail definitions and where we go from here in regards to that?
That was a heavy. Right, interject for perhaps a minute or two. If we take a look at, I'm assuming state parks are one of the issues. This is obviously a place where people recreate or can be otherwise expected to recreate. If we take a look at the Vermont state parks, they describe day use of those parks. And then they have a section specific in pets and day use areas. Pets are permitted on beaches or in picnic areas, although there are some exceptions. Pets are permitted in all campgrounds and trails unless otherwise designated. Pets must be on a leash less than 10 feet or safely confined at all times. That's forest and parks recreation requirements or suggestions for using forest park when we have animals. As I tried to speak to a couple meetings ago, when we're looking at this issue, the issue is not people themselves getting caught in traps. The issue is people, I believe, people with their animals, people with their pets, going out recreating in places where they would be expected to, and then running into a trap. Well, if we have forest and parks saying that it should be 10 feet, if you have your animal, it's expected to be on a leash 10 feet or less, then that seems to comport with what the trappers are suggesting.
Well, you're saying that nobody ever strays off of the path.
Well, hunters do
they-
all the time.
Right.
When they recreate, if we assume hunting is one of the ways people recreate literally all over those woods.
No, what I'm saying is if somebody's walking down a trail with their dog in a 10-foot leash and they have to step aside for somebody to pass, or, something's interesting, they want to go pick a flower. You can make an assumption that they will, stray off the path. So I don't know if 10 feet, would cover that scenario.
Well, I just threw that out.
Right.
Actually, I made a suggestion 2 meetings ago as to what comports to state law as far as setbacks, which would also apply to trails going through private lands. In terms of a class 4 road where there's private property on one side, just what could be expected to happen in that right of way?
Can you repeat that suggestion? Do you remember what it was?
Well, I remember exactly what it was.
Okay. I'm asking because I don't have it at my fingertips and I'm.
Just a minute, please. Here we go. This is Title 19 Highways, 19 VSA 702. It's called width of highways and trails. Right of way for each highway and trail shall be 3 rods wide unless otherwise properly recorded. A rod is 16.5 feet. 3 times 16 was 49.5. Half of that is 24.75. So if we were to comport to statute on minimum right of way, it would be 24.75 feet from the middle of the trail outward, which would easily handle any 10-foot exception.
Yeah, Rob.
First off, point about state parks, fine. Vermont does not have a leash law, and trails that people recreate on go many, many places other than state parks. Without a leash law, you've got dogs, and our town of Fouorth does not require a leash law. We have one of the most popular day hikes in the state. We have dogs all over the place. We do have setbacks of 30-yard setback. That's the town's mandate. The leash law, the leashes, if you are using a leash on a hiking trail, which is not required in most Vermont trails, people are not using 10-foot leashes. I mean, I have 2 big dogs. They're strong, they're fast. I have 26-foot flexi lead on. The best way for me, I guarantee you, I could have brought one in. 26-foot, they have big old things like this. They're made for a dog weighs up close to 100 pounds. And they're a great way to maintain a dog without tangling them in bush because it retracts, so you can let them go out someplace, you can pull them back in, that sort of thing. Whereas a loose stash leash tangles all over the place. When you get to my age, it's important to have not having your leash tangle up. I do leash them most of the time myself now. Didn't used to. I grew up in Vermont without ever leashing a dog. Didn't own a leash, I don't think. But we're living modern Vermont, not 1960s Vermont. So a 10-foot leash is utterly inadequate setback. 500 feet, I think the BWC is certainly willing to discuss that. 10 feet is woefully inadequate. I don't know if we would ever come to an agreement, but like I said, I was part of the group that put up the 30-yard setback in the town of Bolton's Forest. That's worked for us so far.
That's 30 yards, not 30 feet, right?
30 yards, yes. 30 yards.
Just make a counter.
Yeah.
Think of that. I mean, this is really just state land that's focused on, I mean, you're talking about municipal property and private property, which we still have to get permission from everybody, municipal and private. So private property owners can tell us where they do not want us to trap. Municipalities can tell us where they do not want us to trap. It's their land. They could actually say, I don't want anybody hiking in my land as well. So we still have to get permission. I'm sure a lot of people who walk on private land, the property owner doesn't know who's walking there, but they are going to know that we're there and they're going to tell us where and where not to go. So really this focus should be on state land.
Okay.
Well, we have a lot of federal land, which encompasses a massive part of, in fact, I think close to half of the Vermont Trail is not on state land. It's on federal land, as is much of the side trails. But I have in anticipation of this discussion, the dark red on here are the state-owned land absent wildlife management areas. It's a very minuscule part of the state. It doesn't include much of the Long Trail at all. I mean, just.
Can you leave that with us, Rob?
Sure, you can have it.
Okay, thank you.
It's not very well colored in.
That's all right.
People trapping in Long Trail, is that a thing? Like,
Oh, I have no
I've
idea.
never heard of anyone doing that.
But
And
there's
I think a lot of it's remote.
a lot of.
Too remote to get to.
Probably too remote to get to. There's a lot of side trails to Long Trail, which go down to parking areas and access points. You know, the point is, if no one's trapping there, or setbacks are a good idea to begin with. And I think that I've heard in this group before, that most responsible trappers, and I'm willing to believe this absolutely, are going to abide by a reasonable setback. I don't see the harm in having it. And having it on something other than just state land, because that, as you can see, a very small and insignificant way of bothering restriction.
Okay, so I think, Josh, you've got all of this conversation down. I think I want to turn it over to Catherine, so she can at least talk a little bit about some of the questions that came up the last meeting. About, and I'm not suggesting you have the answers, Catherine. I know you weren't, but we had a conversation And I'm not expecting that you would have all the answers, Catherine, but just maybe some of the conversations that led to the discussion.
I do apologize because I have not been in the office for the last 2 weeks, pretty much. So, not really prepared to give a definition of what a public trail is. I will say, the PowerPoint has the Vermont definitions, which I don't think are particularly helpful for people, because they don't really define trail in a way that would allow the wardens to actually enforce. So there are, I did start doing some research on trail definitions. There are some states that have definitions of trails. Most of them are focused on creating recreational trail systems and facilitating recreation. The best definitions that I think are out there are definitions that include public access and where trails are mapped and designated, and by some sort of land management organization or trails organization. So I still have a lot of research to do to try to, define if we, depending on what direction this conversation goes in, whether it goes wider than state lands or, and extends to other lands outside of that, like the rail trail or the long trail. We would have to come up with a definition that kind of encompasses those. Right now, Fouorth Parks and Recreation does have mapped and designated trails on their lands. And it looks like US Forest Service has something that's very similar to that. Most of the federal land, along the Green Mountain spine is US Forest Service land, but I would have to check in with each of those organizations to just make sure that those trail systems are, designated and updated. But if it's, the language in the statute is other public locations where persons may reasonably be expected to recreate. It talks about public trails, but it doesn't really define it. So, I don't know how. Sorry.
Yes, Senator.
So I'm just trying to think of a sort of a positive way to express where we're at on this one. It seems like there is an agreement to have setbacks. And that's how.
Well, I'm gonna write that down. Thank you.
And then there's also an agreement that we need to better define the scope of the application of any rule. Like, is it just state land or is it broader than that? And the third thing I'm hearing is that we need to better define the definitions that trigger this. For instance, what precisely, from a legal point of view, will I need to find words, I don't want to misspeak them. Other public locations where persons may reasonably expect to recreate mean. So just thinking that everyone's agreeing on that we need to do more, but at least that helps point us at what the more needs to address.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I thought it might also be helpful, for folks to just talk a little bit about why they think certain distances are justified. Like, what's the rationale behind this? Like, just explain what the rationale behind your 24 and so, you know.
Make it 20.
I mean, you. Like, what's the rationale behind 500 feet? Rationale behind 7.
So when we originally brought this to the Fish and Wildlife Board back in 2009, looking to have this conversation, and it was denied unanimously. Our request was no traps may be set on public land within 150 feet of any public trail, within 500 feet of any trailhead that is accessible to vehicular traffic, within 1,000 feet of any public campground or picnic area. We, with our national coalition members throughout the country, we had phone calls and we took the best of these various states, and that's what we used to, put together our proposal back in 2019.
What are those, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what are those numbers in reference to? Why 500 feet from a trailhead? That is an arbitrary number, or is that based on some sort of?
As I mentioned, looking to other states, what they do, we have, I'm on a conference call once a month with wildlife advocacy groups, in Arizona and everywhere. Well, actually, Arizona doesn't apply because they don't allow trapping, but, brainstorming this particular issue and trying to find out, what these various states have for trap setbacks. And then my board got together and we came up with something that we thought was fair. We kind of plucked, different, setbacks, from different states.
But I guess, Brenda, to Mike's question, to what are the other states trying to accomplish with that
Well, the
distance?
accomplishment would be that, people who are recreating with their dogs, off leash, which happens quite frequently. Not having to worry about a dog sniffing out a deer leg, near a trail, and end up getting trapped. So, that's 150 feet of any public trail, I think is more than fair.
So let me just clarify then, Brenna. So you now upped that from 150 to 500.
So a couple of weeks ago, there was conversations about how, we're not going to differentiate between, trailheads or campgrounds. We were going to have this apply to, all public lands, because there was a conversation about the need to do that for Act 159. So for the purposes of making it easier to enforce, we went with just one setback versus saying, so it's just going to be.
So 1,000 went down to 500.
That's right.
150, so.
So we kind of said, okay, well, just for the ease of enforceability, if this is going to be required now for Act 159, on all lands where the public may be reasonably expected to recreate, let's have something that is, just standard. And that 500 feet, can certainly be, a starting point for discussions, but, they're at 10 feet, which is, so far off from even what other states are doing. And we're at 500 feet, so
Okay. Anybody have, I think Senator Bray actually gave us a sense of where we need to go from here. And I don't know that we're going to have an agreement on the setback distance in this room, and it may be up to the department and the commissioner to do some investigating of what other states are doing. Yes, Kevin.
Yeah, I just want to, the legislation is messy. I think it was last minute, wasn't well thought out in a lot of ways. However, safe distance is a concept, which I think we can all get our heads wrapped around. And we're lucky, we have 1 million trap nights of data that talks about safe distance. Trappers didn't get told where to set the traps, they chose where to set them. They didn't have troubles. The same is true with, 30,000 trap nights in Vermont. We have safe distances already. This is a solution looking for a problem, I guess, and there isn't a problem. So I would say playgrounds, parks, all those things, we already have safe distance behaviors left and right. We may have concerns, and those are, valid. I'm not saying you can't have concerns, but if it's, reasonably recreating places, my goodness, I recreate everywhere in the Green Mountain National Forest and the State Forest. municipal forest. And that's a reasonable activity on my part. So, this is messy legislation. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. But I think our intent has been to identify safe distance, and we have. And we're not going to go after each little line item here and imagine that we're going to come to agreement. So.
Okay, so I saw 3 hands up here and I'm not sure whose went up first because I was writing. Rob was first. Who's second? Okay, you're second, Brenna's third. Rob,
Just going to the underlying data, trap nights and such, 30,000, whatever it is. I know that prior to 2018, incidental caught, dogs being caught wasn't required to be reported. So there's a reporting issue there. I remember reading, Bruce Verrocchio in 7 days. I think he used to be the president of Bronx Trappers Association. He was quoted as saying he catches dogs all the time. And them on their way with a pat on the head. I can certainly before Friday get you this article. That also points to possibly an underreporting of these incidences. I know my niece had a dog caught, my neighbor had a dog caught, we had Representative Sheldon's had a dog caught. It does happen, and it's not possibly as rare as we like to try to believe it is. I've never had a dog caught, and I don't frankly worry about it that much. But I can appreciate why people do. So I just have a little bit of it sticks a little bit when I hear this kind of data put out, which is based on possibly very, very spotty reporting. So
What about that data? Is that data valid?
The Aqua data has technicians recording 25 variables with the trapper at every site. I don't know about Bruce Braccio following him around the woods, but the Aqua data is very solid because of the trapper technician teams that recorded all.
and I mean, to be fair, sometimes dogs got caught. But it was
1.5% of the time.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, it happens, but I think in the case of the Atwood situation, did Atwood offer to pay the vet fees for any dog, and did any dog require? Okay. So to your point, Rob, I think you're correct that dogs get caught once in a while. True. Yeah. Bruce.
Yeah, I don't trust what stuff says anyways, but that's me, and I'm skeptical of all journalists, but that's just from past history. But just back to we're going back to 159 a lot and saying how we need to follow this. These are recommendations. It says right in paragraph A, recommendations based on investigation and research conducted by scientists and experts. Well, research shows already that these are not problems, but we're following the research, what we're told to do by 159. And our recommendation can actually be no change. It's not a requirement that a change has to happen. So if you're following the data and the research as told in 159, no change could be liable here. I just took my thunder because he beat me to the million trap hour nights.
Okay, Brenna.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback, Rob pretty much said what I was going to say is that it really, I just wish we would, stop referring to, dogs not getting caught in traps, cats not getting caught in traps, because again, prior to 2018, there was very little data. And I still think there's underreporting. And even prior to 2018, when there was no required reporting, going through records, we know that dogs were trapped. People were gravely injured trying to release their dogs from traps. Cats lost limbs in traps. I mean, so it's happened. And so, diminishing the reality that it has happened and will happen again in the future, doesn't sit well with me at all. So if we're not going to require reporting, then we can't say that it doesn't happen because no reporting was ever required. So
I think Tom was referring to
I'm not referring to Tom, I'm referring to what's happening in Vermont.
Yeah, but that was, some of that was done in Vermont. Some of that research was done in Vermont. I think 10 years of research actually done in Vermont.
And again, we go back to the trapper and his or her technician were the only ones out in the field who were cataloging all of the non-target catches. And so there's concerns we have with the process, right? Trapper and his or her wife or his son out there, they're the only two out in the field who know if they caught a coyote or a red-tailed hawk or a domestic dog. So there's not a lot of trust in the process. So all I can say is based on what I've seen here in Vermont, and if it's more than a few dogs who have been trapped and injured, and their owners injured when they're trying to use it. And that is what we're trying to get at. I mean, more and more people we know are recreating on public lands now, and they want, we get phone calls and emails every year around this time from Vermonters saying, can you tell us where I can go, hiking where I don't have, where trapping's not allowed, and we have to tell them, it's allowed everywhere and you don't really know where the traps are. So it's a very real concern we get from the public. So we know that this isn't a, solution in search of a problem. This is a very real problem and a very real concern for Vermonters. And again, I think, I don't know who mentioned it, we may just have to allow the commissioner just to make the decision. We're very vast, positions here as far as,
Yeah.
where we are.
Okay,
It'd
so
be
I
Sean.
think, wait, I think
Sean.
Tom, and then who came first?
Sean.
has his hands up.
Oh, Sean has his hand up. Okay, was he before Tom?
Yeah, he was.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Sean. Thank you for paying attention. Not you, Sean, but them.
So I would, and I don't know if anybody can answer this, and I will agree with Brenna in the fact that there was no mandatory reporting prior to 2018. But I would love to know how many of these dogs are at the end of a leash when they are caught in traps, as opposed to dogs that are running free on the landscape. Because in my mind, those are two very different things. And if the dogs are being allowed to run free on the landscape, and this is coming from 2 decades of being a warden, most people are going to say, oh, my dog wouldn't do fill in the blank. And dogs are canines, and they will act like wild canines when they are not supervised. So if they're out running free, they are a much bigger danger to wildlife at large than the trap is to them being caught in it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Now, so it was Tom, Mike, and Bruce. Anybody else?
No.
Oh, and Senator Bray. I'm not sure again who was first. I apologize, but all right, why don't we just go this way?
I just want to show you, the thing that I'm really concerned about is the definition of whether it's public lands or a public trail. And I don't know what that really means. But I'm going to show you a real life Vermont example of the complexity in which that brings. So this is the town line. This is town D and town T, okay? There's a property owner who lives right here. Town D has a piece of property that is private, but then gets deeded to a school. So the school has it and puts in a cross-country trail and a mountain bike trail that comes down and goes right along the property line, within 10 feet of the property line. This property owner goes to this town and says, how can that trail go in there? It's right on the property line. This town says, go talk to this town, because that's where you live. The select board here says, go talk to this town. The trail is in their property. The trail is going to be designated as part of the Gore mountain biking trail, and it's on school property. So there's a cross-country ski trail and a mountain bike trail. I don't know if that's public trail by the scenario that we're talking about, but I know this property owner, depending on the setback, could not set traps for coyotes along their property, on their property, because of the uncertainty is that, will that be a public trail? And I know we don't know here tonight, but it gets to the point of, well, there's a lot of trails used by the public on private property with the consent of the landowner. And I don't know if anybody traps on this property, but the designating of a public trail on this property will affect this person and all the chickens that live in that little house right there. And to say, well, the property owner can protect the property, I'm talking about just in the scenario we're using for fall trapping, regulated trapping of the public. So it's just very complex, whether it's public lands, this scenario doesn't really play out. If it's public trails to whatever that the group kind of goes to, these kind of complexities will happen with vast trails, Appalachian trails, long trails, because of the way they're laid out to make them effective and get across the landscape. I don't have an answer, but it comes back to those definitions of kind of just beyond the distance, where does that word public get us?
Thank you, Mike.
I just want to touch, we spent a lot of time thinking about what reasonable people do and then the risks and assumptions they take based on their actions. If somebody wants to walk up a public trail with their dog on a leash, be it a 25-foot leash or a 10-foot leash, these are all reasonable things, and whatever distance we eventually come to, or the commissioner comes to, I think is going to have to recognize that we can assure some people some reasonable degree of baseline safety in public places. But what we can't do is guarantee their safety beyond reasonable distances in public places. And when somebody takes their dog off the leash and allows it to roam some distance, they are assuming some responsibility for their own actions and the actions of their dog. And we cannot guarantee people's safety at all times. That's not the job of the state. The job of the state is to say, in reasonable places, we're gonna, give you some reasonable degree of protection of the law, knowing that if you go outside those bounds, you are taking some responsibility for your actions. But I think when somebody unhooks their dog and they are no longer in the direct control of their owner, they are assuming the risks that come with having a dog that's on the landscape. Be that wildlife or cars or anything else. And as a dog owner who runs bird dog, my dog has gotten into trouble before. And fortunately, he hasn't been killed by cars or coyotes or anything else, but it's a reality every time I take him off the leash. I accept that.
Senator.
So you have that second question there. What's the definition of trail? And I think probably what goes hand in hand with that is this term that I don't quite know what it means, which is other public locations. That's to me is, and then a third piece, these are all related to defining is, the relationship between the state making a law and then private landowners and municipalities. I'm not sure, Catherine may know this, or maybe it's something to be drilled into and figured out, but whose law prevails? Can the state law actually intrude on private landowners' decision-making about what kind of traffic happens where and how? I mean, we were just looking at that illustration up there that showed two different towns having. So I'm just trying to enumerate the questions that we're gonna, or the commissioner. I mean, it seems like we can't answer them here, but at least people are making it easier to figure out where the sticky points are.
But this is helpful actually to try to actually outline where they are. Catherine.
So, generally, federal law trumps state law. And state law will trump municipal law. I do know of some state, some municipal towns that have prohibited hunting and trapping on their land, and that's been challenged in court and upheld. So if we were to pass a law that regulated, where people could set traps, it would apply, and we said that it applied to all trails on wherever, however we define it, it would apply. It could apply to municipal lands if that's what we decided. It would apply to private. So trying to be careful about how we regulate and what we intend by that regulation. And that's not a decision that I would make. I would just try to draft something that met the intent of the decision makers.
So I think, well,
Can I
do you have a
quick follow-up? So, Scott, you get sorry. Not a second person.
It's fine.
Like, Gordon Scott. Do you get called on to both municipal and private land?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Sean's got his hand up. Bruce, I think you're next, then, no, I think you were up. You were,
question.
you're, oh, okay. All right, so, who was first, Rob or Sean?
Sean.
Sean, go ahead.
Very quickly, I'm going to make an offer to Brenna based on what she just said about folks calling in this time of year to ask where they can walk. I would offer, if you wanted to set up a group training or do it by video, I would love to do something to show all your folks how to safely release a trap. So if the unfortunate happens and they did get their dog stuck in a trap, they would have the knowledge to release it quickly. I'd be willing to do that if that's something you guys are interested in.
I appreciate that, Sean. I'm just thinking of me, you know, I have a 110-pound pit bull cross and I can't even touch his paws. He's got very sensitive paws. And if my dog, who adores me, ever got caught in a light pole trap, I don't know what I would do. I mean, a veterinarian would need to come out to the field and anesthetize my dog because you would not be able to get near my dog. So what I'm saying, it's just, I think it's good for people to know, and I will probably take you up on that offer, Sean, but I don't want it to happen. You know, and I also agree with the word of Scott that the public does need to take some measures of responsibility. You know, that there's some things that if you do, you know, you're going to assume a risk. But, you know, 10 feet off the trail is nowhere even close to where we need to be. So.
I might add, Sean, then I might just add, Sean, that we had also talked about putting together a brochure which could go in vets offices or at trailheads and things like that. So, Rob, I think he was next and then you, Tom.
I have a question for Catherine, just on that, the hierarchy of legal stuff.
Oh, yeah.
If we pass, say, you know, a setback rule, would it be able to be brought up the line to the federal land and like the, you know, the national forest?
I believe it would. It would really depend on whether there was any federal regulation or law that exempted or there is such a thing as preemption. So there are some federal laws that preempt state law.
But if it didn't.
So if it didn't necessarily conflict with a federal law.
That makes sense.
You know, I mean, people who hunt on federal land in Vermont have to follow regulations.
Sure.
But they also potentially have to follow the regulations of the land manager. So.
Okay, so Tom's next and then you, Joanne, you sound like you have a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just follow up with Sean's suggestion. I would be willing to be part of that. I've been part of, in my professional career, webinars, principally to sporting dog owners in the West, in these areas that sort of prep them for, particularly a new sporting dog owner, what to expect. So we have a veterinarian, a warden, and a biologist talk about releasing animals in traps, poisonous snakes, barbed wire fences, skunks, and porcupines. And if you're gonna have your dog off lead hunting whale, that's what you need to know about. But just that information and awareness that Sean is talking about is really important, and it's something actually collectively we could do together. So I'd be willing to be part of that too. I think it's a good suggestion, Sean.
Yeah, and will you make sure to highlight that, Josh, so that we make sure we get that included. Okay, Joanne.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Rob's question about federal lands, I was going to ask whether I noticed in the VTA recommendations, it talks about state land, WMAs, private municipal lands. Did you have any discussions around federal lands or not?
I think that question is for Sean, for Kevin and Bruce and.
We left this meeting with the idea that state land was our focus. And we went around the room, I think Josh has confirmed this and said, does anyone disagree with this? And that's what we went to our members and suggested was, okay, this is about state land, because you already need permission on private and municipal. And, you know, I don't want to start over with that one. I'm sorry that doesn't make everyone satisfied, but.
It's just a question, I don't.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at Rob, I'm sorry that.
I wasn't here at the meeting when you guys made that decision. I made my position on the last meeting quite
Right.
clear.
You've been very clear. I'm just saying that as a group, we met And David Kelly, I suspect, was in agreement as well, so that's what we brought to our members.
And Joanne and I did talk to both Kim and Josh after one of the meetings to make very clear that, you know, trap setbacks we wanted on all lanes, state, federal, and WMAs. So, you know, limiting it to state lands was not something that we ever agreed to, so.
I think it was back to the low hanging fruit and not like, you know, that would be inclusive of all, and we don't need to go back and, you know, revisit that, but.
Oh, Sean, was your hand up again, or were you just, didn't put it down?
Sorry, didn't put it down.
Okay, all right. Huh? You have an agreement, we'll take it, little, big.
I totally get and agree with Sean's point about, but I think, I'm sorry, Mike's a point about responsibility of, I have three dogs. I walk them all the time. One of them is really trustworthy off lead. She's off lead all the time, but you take certain risks when you have them off, and I think that's totally reasonable. Vermont does not have a leash law, but they do have a free running law. That's when John's talking about dogs running loose. We used to do that all the time when growing up. It's now against the law in Vermont. You have to have it under voice control. If they're not under voice control, then you can be cited. And almost every town has mimicked that statute in their town ordinances on the ACO board. And, but I also wanted to agree on the point about training yourself to release dogs from the trap. I trained myself on that early on, years ago, and I can do a Convair 330 real quick by hand without a tool. So my dogs are big. I go in there, take them out, and take the damage, and get them out of traps. But I think a seminar on that would be. It's not the solutions that we're setting out for in here, but I think as an independent idea, it's a very good one. But, I think it all get behind.
Okay. I mean, if anybody has anything new or different to say about this conversation, we can still entertain it, but I would suggest that we've probably gotten some really good suggestions from the group, not just tonight, but in the past meetings, and we will certainly include everything that everybody has told us. We'll go back and look at other states and we'll make a recommendation. And just like the other recommendations, there'll be an opportunity for everybody to weigh in again through the public process.
Just real quick for you, when you're talking about trail definitions, did you look at all trails, the maps they've got?
Yeah, we did.
No.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
a good resource.
Yeah, yeah. Did you?
Well,
Okay, all right, so I think we can, if everybody's in agreement, I think we can close this meeting. Again, thank you for the participation of everybody in this group. It's been a long process, I know, and some of it's.
I do have a question.
Oh, okay.
So you're looking at schedule, you're gonna put some recommendations together and then we're going to have a public meeting, correct?
Correct.
Is there a timeline on?
Yeah. Good segue.
And it's a public meeting about what we came up with or about what the commissioner's coming up with?
The public meeting, and my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave or Catherine or Mark, will be about what the commissioner's recommendations are. So there may be a lack of agreement by everybody in this room to what the recommendations are, but there'll be an opportunity to weigh in and make comment through the public process, both at the public meeting. And what did I do with the, oh, maybe they're here. At the public meeting and again, through the board process, because there'll be other public meetings through the board process. So this is how we envision the next steps to be. And I'll just.
Is that a sticky one or a tape one?
It's a sticky one. Yeah, I'll just put it right up here. So we're hoping actually to do the public meeting in October, end of October, beginning of November. And then we'll make recommendations to the commissioner. There'll be some draft recommendations that will be commented on at that public meeting, and then recommendations to the commissioner at the end of December. The commissioners report to the legislature on or before January 15th. Proposal to the Fish and Wildlife Board in January, February of 2023. And then final regs in December of 2023 in preparation to meet the legislative mandate of January 2024.
Question on that.
Yes.
So recommendation to commissioner, what does that mean? Why is it taking from the end of October to November? Because I thought that the commissioner is making the recommendation prior to it going to the public meeting. So what would be then the follow-up recommendation?
Well, these would be draft recommendations that he would bring to the public meeting, or somebody would bring to the public meeting. And we always, when we make recommendations, when we gather more public input, there's always a potential for tweaking those recommendations based on what we hear from the public. And that's how the board process works as well, is it goes out to the public and then it comes back to the board and they look at it again and to consider whether or not those are, they need to adjust what they had come up with. And so it has a chance to get tweaked a few times through this process, or, changed. Tom?
I have something after you get through the
okay.
process question,
All
before
right.
you close the meeting.
Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah, Joanne?
Yeah, just a question about all the materials that we've gone through. Is there like a central place where all that will be for the public record, or how is that,
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how, Chris, you or Josh, want to respond to that, how we'll set something up.
Well, typically we'll have a page with the recommendations. And I think in this case, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll probably have a lot of the backup minutes and such for the public to review because of the nature of the topic. That way, anyone will be able to access what transpired here and all the supporting documents that have been given to us.
And the videos probably as
Right.
well. Yeah. So what we could try to do, and Josh, if you make a note of this, is maybe send a link out to everybody on the working group once we get that established, so you can just access it via the link.
Okay.
Okay?
And if we have things to add that aren't on there that we used as part of our discussion, we can send that.
Yeah. I would think so, sure. We don't capture everything. Yes, so Tom, go ahead.
So at one point, this is just a point of information for the group, we had talked about funding. Senator had mentioned kind of potentially at some point exploring funding for the changes in methodology that we thought about. And I did, sort of a back of the napkin calculation that if you took the features that are listed in what the VTA put in and you packaged them in a trap, commercially, that trap would go for about $20. And if you looked at 400 trappers, some of them own 8 dozen, some of them own half a dozen. But if you purchased 2 dozen for every 400 trappers practicing, that's $192,000 for replacement elements of their gear to meet that criteria of swiveling and chain length and all that stuff. At the same time, if you looked at exclusionary devices that are kind of wire mesh that would go in front of a body grip and trap, whether it's in the tree or on the ground. Currently, because Maine requires them for certain species, commercially, they go for between $15 and $25. But if you figure on average, again, $20, 400 trappers, it's $192,000 for 2 dozen exclusionary devices and 2 dozen of a select trap type that roughly for the type of methodology for somebody who doesn't already have it. I just wanted you to have that sort of frame of reference. It could go up or down from there, but it's kind of the going rate for that trap type and exclusionary systems.
Tom, just so I have it, you said for both 192,000?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, figuring 400 trappers, averaging $20, either a trap or exclusionary devices. The exclusionary devices are 15 to 25 commercially available, so you just pick a middle number. But that's just a point of reference as it was a point of early conversation.
Someone new materials or modification?
New materials.
400 trappers, 24 traps. Okay.
Yeah, 2 dozen of each, Ken. 2
Oh,
dozen
24,
of-
okay,
Yep,
yep, thank you.
and could be more, could be less, but that was.
Excuse me.
I seems like I remember, from the springtime conversation that something like 80% of Vermont trappers are all using, BMP style traps. So is that why you have a figure in your own averaging 24? Because some people will be already set and other people may need more than 24.
Those are relative numbers based on the number of trappers. The department could refine that up or down even
Yeah.
by species based on what they knew trappers own and so, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
frame the ballpark
Sure.
and then, yeah.
You already tried a $400,000 check with that.
And then I have one other element.
Okay,
Okay, so I know we're making recommendations to the commission. That's functionally what we're doing. Some of this may manifest itself in rules, regulations of the board, but, or the legislature. But it would just seem to me, from where I'm coming from with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, if you're trapping fur bearers in Vermont, we recommend you use these best management practices. And it doesn't matter when, where, or why. If you're a grad student at UVM, you're a property owner, you're concerned about the welfare of wildlife, I would like to see this group recommend to the commissioner that the department recommend pest management practices when you're trapping, period. And to me, that's no different than telling the public, when you go deer hunting, wear orange. The department recognizes that, they recommend it, it's in their abstract, and whether you pursue that or not, it's just a good thing to do. And to me, that's what these represent universally if we're talking about trapping. We'll still have the refinement of what the group is working through, but I think for us, to tell the commissioner, might be good for the department to plug this in the trapper ed program when you're talking about trapping, when you're trying to get the public to understand trapping universally. So I would just put that to the group before we close.
Brenna.
Thinking about future funding, to fund things like, newer traps. Right now, trappers in Vermont pay $23 for a trapping license. And that is, other states, I think on average, it's like a $35 trapping license. It's probably been $23 for decades. So I would like the department to consider, raising the trapping license fee to be more in line with what other states are charging. $23 is not enough. And I think $35 would be more in line with what into a fund to allocate for future, trap replacements or something like that.
okay. Yes, Senator Bray.
Yes, so we, on fees, depends how it gets interpreted and where, but in general, they're supposed to just cover operating costs. So I don't, theoretically, someone's been looking at 3 or whatever it is and saying that's enough to run the department. There may or may not be opportunity there, and generally, fees aren't designed to be money making, but cover operating costs for it.
We have submitted request to Fish and Wildlife to actually see how much it costs to run the trapping program. And there's no numbers, there's no data, but just knowing that, Katie Geider's, salary and all of the work they put into running this trapping program for 1,000 trappers. I would almost bet my life that it's a losing business financially. 23 times 1,000, it's not even paying for half a salary of one of their biologists. So
I just have to say that what we have is a fur bearer conservation program. That was what my job was the conservation of fur bearers for future generations and the habitats that they depend on. Trapping is a very small component of managing and conserving fur bearers for future generations. That's my job. That was my job, was making sure that these fur bearers were going to be around for my kids and my grandkids. And that's what the department paid me to do.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that $23 times, 900 trappers, did that even pay for, the work that you put into just managing the trapping component for their newsletter?
It used to probably bring in more than what I
But
used to
not
spend
now.
on trapping.
it's like $20,000.
Well, we're not, yeah, I'm not even gonna get into it, but yes. I have no idea. I have no idea right now. Yes,
Just what you just said, Tom, the parking lot item that I wanted to bring up again about landowners, you know, so if there are agreement that landowners, with other, whatever recommendations we end up having, I don't know if there's agreement, but we certainly would love to see landowners subject to the same regulations as.
yeah, that was a parking lot issue, wasn't it?
Right.
Right, yeah, it was new, yes, everybody,
4820.
yeah.
Right, I know that would require a change in statute, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a consensus on that, but.
You know, I'm glad you brought it up again. We'll make sure it's in the minutes and we'll have that conversation as well. Thank you for reminding us. I do have it in the parking lot, in some of the minutes, but, it's good to have it right here. Mhm. Okay, again, thank you for the hard work, folks. I know it was challenging for everybody and, but you rose to the challenge, I think, in general. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And, we'll see what comes out of the work that's done internally. So,
Thank you,
appreciate
Kim.
it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
No, you probably can't. That's all.
I'm doing that now.